This is a recap of the places that we have visited during 2023, and I'll show you some of my favourite shots from each of those places. So the first location was in February, when I asked you to join me down at the Garston Nature Reserve on the River Mersey, when I used the Legacy 400mm Sigma telephoto lens on a tripod, most unusual for me. I got a few images down there which I was quite happy with, and I was really quite impressed with the performance of the lens. You know, a 1980s vintage lens, used wide open because of the limited, there's no aperture ring on that lens, so I was struggling with it, but I got some useful images, and yes, a few keepers, I guess you'd say, but nothing to really shout about. Then also in February, we took a trip over the River Mersey to Birkenhead and had a look around Hamilton Square, the very impressive town hall, the war memorial monuments that are there. And although it was a cold and not very exciting day weather-wise, I came away relatively happy with the images that I got there. All these are shot, obviously, normally on either the Olympus OMD EM1 Mark II or the Olympus Pen F. Certainly the majority are on the EM1 Mark II. Staying in February, I took you to a foreign country. I took you across the border into North Wales, and I spent a good few hours wandering around Flint, the castle there, built by Edward I. I was quite happy with some of the images that I got out of that excursion. Nothing, again, to write home about. The castle itself is fairly difficult to photograph, certainly from ground level, because it's only a few feet above sea level, to be honest with you. But I got some useful stuff when I went down to the marshes on the banks of the River Dee. And the River Dee has featured fairly heavily in 2023. I'll have to change that for this year. Then I took out the little Lumix GF1, the infrared converted version, and I did some infrared shots around town. And I think probably out of all the photographs that I've taken during 2023, these are going to be some of my favorites, simply because it matches my style of photography. I live in an urban environment, and you know, I'm always on the lookout for contrasting tones and angles, and certainly with the infrared, it fits the bill pretty darn well, to be honest with you. Then in March, I took you down to the Herculaneum dock here in Liverpool. Not so many still images for you to have a look at here, There are a couple of the old casemates where they used to store the very flammable explosives and liquids, either being offloaded from cargo ships or waiting to be loaded onto outgoing cargo ships. And of course there was the Dockers steps, and I included some information about the Dockers umbrella, the old elevated railway line that used to run all the way along the docks here in Liverpool. Then in April, I went to the Palm House in Sefton Park, a lovely building, really excellently renovated, and is now used for functions with coffee lounge in there. All sorts of social activities happen in the Palm House. And I think I got, some reasonable images there. Again, yes, I've kept them. They're not ones that are going to ignite my passion, if I can use that expression. But nevertheless, it's a lovely building. If any of you are coming to Liverpool, then I strongly recommend that you take a walk around Sefton Park, and in particular, the Palm House. It's really, really good. April came along pretty darn quickly, and that was the time I visited Speke Hall, which is a wonderful National Trust property here in the south of Liverpool, not too far away from John Lennon Airport. A Tudor house, beautiful grounds. During my visit, unfortunately, half of the building was covered in scaffolding, which kind of limited me as to what I could show you. I did get some images of both the pond and parkland around it, but mainly I concentrated on the architectural details. It is a wonderful building, National Trust, who do a great job. At the end of April, I took a trip over to the far side of Birkenhead to Flaybrick Cemetery, which is a very large cemetery indeed, and I'm a bit of a sucker for cemeteries. I don't know what it is. Something in my mentality draws me to graveyards and cemeteries. But it's a wonderful location, extremely well maintained, and I did get some images that I'm pretty happy with there. Again, it's the EM1 Mark II with a variety of lenses. I think it was, I was certainly using the 7.5mm ultra-wide Samyang for some of those shots, which is a lens that I loved. I have since changed it for the Laowa 6mm. But nevertheless, if anybody's thinking about getting an ultra-wide lens for micro four thirds, the Samyang 7.5 I would rate very highly. Now we move on to May, which was a very busy month for everybody here in Liverpool. I didn't really get any striking images of the Eurovision Song Contest, but boy oh boy, it was a major attraction for tens, if not hundreds of thousands of visitors to Liverpool. Very colourful, and it was extremely well organised, and it was extremely well received by everybody. Of course, Liverpool hosted it because of the present situation in Ukraine. Ukraine won it in 2022 and should have hosted it last year, 23, but of course their current situation precluded that, so Liverpool stepped in, and everybody has agreed we did a fantastic job. I didn't do a very fantastic job with the photography. I also took you on a trip on the Mersey Ferry, one of our most famous landmarks and tourist attractions, probably made most famous by the band Gerry and the Pacemakers, Ferry Cross the Mersey, that particular song. It's a wonderful outing, and I got some reasonable images. I think the majority of it was captured on video though, and I'm not sure I can splice any into this. If I can, I will do, with pleasure.
He's a man I know right well. If a man is a sailor, he can get along, and if nothing, he is sure in hell. So fare well, my own true love, and when I return, united we will be.
Right at the end of May, I had a disappointing 3-location outing, and I think the video that I decided to put out was to try and emphasize that sometimes you go out with all the best intentions in the world and yet things just don't work out for you. I'm just trying to remember where I went. I went to Hale Village, the home of that giant of a man. I went down to Heswall Marshes, and I also went over to Dibbinsdale, nearly said Dibbins Brook, Dibbinsdale Nature Reserve on the Wirral, and came away with really quite disappointing results. The idea behind the video was to try and encourage people, don't get downhearted, these things happen. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. Beginning of June, and I took a quick trip up to Blundell Sands, the home of the Anthony Gormley installation entitled Another Place, with all those statues on the beach. Pretty interesting. Not the most successful timing of my visit, to be honest with you. I think I timed it very poorly from memory with regard to the tides. These are cast iron figures that are located deep in the sand, and at high tide they are practically invisible. At least the ones furthest away from the shore are invisible. Those nearer the coastline remain visible throughout. But to get the best photographic opportunities, you need to time your visit with the tides, to be honest with you. At the end of June, I visited Parkgate on the Wirral, which at one time in its heyday was a bustling port. Now, of course, with the silting up of the River Dee, it's impossible for any boat to get close to the shoreline there. But I did take a few detailed shots of some of the interesting architecture, and I also did a handheld panorama, which hopefully I'll be able to include in this for you. I was pleasantly surprised at how well the software stitched all that together for me. As those of you that follow the channel will know, I use Affinity Photo version 2 at the moment. I also use On1 Photo Raw. I'm not an Adobe Photoshop user. You can draw your own conclusions as to why not. Then we move on to August and Port Sunlight, which is the idyllic industrialised village, if that's the right expression, created by Lord Leverhulme with the Sunlight Soap empire and the factory there. A lot of really nice locations, interesting housing. There is the Dell, which, as you will have seen if you've watched the wedding video that I did last time, it's a superb spot for taking wedding group photographs. And there's a lot of history there. Really good place to go and see Port Sunlight on the Wirral. middle of August and I ventured further afield. I went to Wigan, specifically to look at and photograph Wigan Pier, which of course, as those of you in the UK will probably know, is not the traditional seaside kind of pier. It is a pier that was constructed to offload and onload barges from the canals, but it has gathered a kind of cult status within the country. And I was very keen to go and have a look. And I was really pleasantly surprised with the images that I got. And that was the one time in particular that I shot everything as JPEGs. And I think the title of the accompanying video emphasized that. Everything was shot using JPEGs. Towards the end of August, I took a quick outing down to Allerton Towers, which used to be a magnificent country house, long since demolished. All that's left there now is the orangery. Again, here I was using the 7.5 Samyang to get some of those images, and I managed to get a couple of really quite successful macro shots using the 12 to 50 close focusing facility. They weren't taken on the 30mm macro, I didn't have that with me, but the 12 to 50, which I am keeping, you'll be pleased to know, the 12 to 50 does have that, so-called macro setting, and the close focusing enabled me to get the photograph of the bee in particular. That sticks in my mind. In September, I went up the coast to Southport, a very famous seaside resort here in the UK, and I got some images of the relatively new bridge connecting the mainland to the Marine Drive, together with some of the rides and people enjoying themselves, that sort of thing. A very hot summer's day, really had a great time. Excellent location for photography. Middle of September, I went over to Thornton Hough, which is yet another industrially created village, if you like, again by Lord Leverhulme. It was purchased by Lord Leverhulme. It wasn't initially constructed by him, but he took over. Again, picturesque houses. Had a wonderful conversation with one of the residents there. A couple of nice churches. Excellent for me, fits my style of photography down to a T. At the end of September, I visited the motor racing circuit at Aintree Racecourse. And Aintree Racecourse, of course, is world famous for the Grand National Steeplechase horse race. Not so many people are aware of the fact that it is home to a Grand Prix racing circuit, part of which is still in use. And I had a great time down there. I was very limited with what I could capture, in particular with regard to cars on the track. Sadly, the spectator areas are so far back from the circuit these days that without a trackside pass, you're really very limited in what you can accomplish. But I got some nice shots, I think anyway, for those petrol heads, of a couple of the interesting race cars that were there. Beginning of October, I went even further afield and I visited Manchester and the Castlefield Canal Basin in particular, a location that I've wanted to go to many times, and I'm pretty darn sure I'm going to go back there this year. There's so much interesting architecture there, and although Liverpool architecture is wonderful, don't get me wrong, there's a different mix in Manchester, which I certainly want to try and capture in one way or another. How successful it's going to be, I don't know. The trip I took was using the Olympus Pen F, and the Pen F I shot a lot using the inbuilt art filters, which generate dozens of different JPEG effects as well as raw images. So that was one of the first times I used the Pen F. Then at the end of October, I visited the National Waterways Museum, or as a lot of people still refer to it, the Boat Museum in Ellesmere Port. Some great opportunities there for photographers of all types. There is the boating aspect, there's the industrial aspect, there is a social history aspect of it because they have recreated, I think it's 3 different cottages with interiors from different eras. Highly recommended, well worth a visit indeed. And I was very happy with some of the images that I got. And that was one of, if not the first occasion when I was using the Laowa 6mm ultra wide angle lens. Then at the end of November, I took a trip up to the St. John's Beacon, or the Radio City Tower, as people call it here in Liverpool. Got some shots from the top looking out. Difficult. If you've watched the video, you'll realise that I was struggling with some very strange colour balances, but nevertheless it was fun to go up there, and I hope some of you enjoyed the stills. They're not really anything to shout about, but hey ho, sometimes it just doesn't work for you, as I've already said. And then finally, at the beginning of December, I went to one of my very favourite locations, Shotwick, right down on the base of the Wirral Peninsula, literally right next door to North Wales, with the wonderful remotely placed church and the tiny village, or hamlet I suppose you'd call it. And I was really, really impressed with that. I always have been ever since the first time I saw it, and I hope you enjoyed some of the images. So there we are, 2023 in a nutshell. Obviously I've done more than that, but I wanted to share with you and recap the locations that I went to more than anything. There have been other videos interspersed throughout that period of time. I've uploaded a video every week, so fingers crossed the weather improves and I can get out to some different places, talk about different things, and hopefully you will all join me on the journey. So you know very well what I always say: enjoy your photography, stick at it, and I'll see you all very soon. Bye for now.